going on, family? My name is Matt Smith, aka MDS, the EQ coach, and welcome back to another episode of The Baggage Claim. This is the podcast where we unload all the things that we're carrying so we can travel lighter through our lives in our jobs, our lives at home, and even our journey through faith. And so, pack your bags, grab your courage, let's rehuman together. So, there was a movie that came out my junior year of high school. It's called Just Friends, and it's a Christmas film, believe it or not. And it stars Ryan Reynolds and Amy Smart and Anna Faris, and it's this hilarious slapstick, pretty raunchy comedy about the character that Ryan Reynolds plays. And in high school, he was this extra dweeby, overweight male cheerleader who wore a retainer and had acne and the whole nine, right? And his best friend is played by Amy Smart, who, in contrast, is the popular girl, right? The hot chick in high school. And she puts him in the friend zone. And so the entire story is his journey of redemption as he travels back home for the holidays. He's gone from being that extra dweeby guy to being this hot Hollywood music producer. And Anna Faris plays, the pop star that everybody's fawning over, who is, absolutely insane. But the basis of the story is him being able to go back and forgive Amy Smart's character for never giving him a chance, right? And putting him in the friend zone. And what's funny is that Anna Faris sings this song about forgiveness, and it goes, "Forgiveness is more than saying sorry." And then the lyrics are ridiculous. She says, "To forgive is divine, so let's have a glass of wine and have makeup sex until the end of time, 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 time." And so, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about forgiveness. That's going to be the theme of the episode today. And aside from the ridiculous, hilarious slapstick physical comedy reference of that film Just Friends, um, it kind of begs the question, what is forgiveness? What it's about, and why is it so important, right? And I think we can get into the conversation of what forgiveness is by starting the conversation with what forgiveness isn't, right? And so I think for a lot of us, what we want forgiveness to be is a get out of jail free card. What we want forgiveness to be is a complete wiping clean of the slate and even ignorance to the actions that we've taken in order to offend someone or to create a situation that's not fair. And sorry to say that that's not what forgiveness is at all. Forgiveness is not a free pass. It's not a get out of jail free card. It's not anything like that. The best way that I heard forgiveness described is that forgiveness is the writing off of a debt. And so if you were to think about what would it look like if you let a 5-year-old borrow $50, right? And, kids are getting bold these days. Like, $50 sounds like it's a lot of money to an adult, but apparently to a kid, $50 is nothing. But anyway, this is a 5-year-old who wants a toy or wants to buy, a video game, or who knows, just wants $50 so they can trick off to all the kids in the neighborhood when the ice cream truck comes, right? Who knows? Who cares? But we think about forgiveness and we think about how we hold things against people. And I would ask you the question, how ridiculous would it be for you to expect the $50 to be paid back by that 5-year-old? Right? We would have to consider that one, 5-year-old doesn't have a job. Two, they probably don't understand the value of that $50 as it's applied to anything outside of the purposes that they want it for. And three, they're probably going to forget that they owe you $50 after they get the thing that they want, right? So they're not capable of repaying the debt. And thus, you make the decision to forgive the debt, right? That in its essence is what forgiveness is. That in its essence is what grace is, right? And even if we take the biblical standpoint, we know that grace is the application of God applying justice and mercy in the same space, right? God will pay that debt on our behalf through the sacrifice of his son, Jesus Christ, and not completely wipe away the fact that we've done things to offend or to live in a way that is not congruent with what would create a harmonious relationship between us and God. But he's willing to look past those things, right? The debt itself has been paid. He wrote it off, and he gives us an opportunity to then go back and do the right thing, but doesn't hold the expectation that we even understand or value the weight of the debt. And so I think about forgiveness, and of course, it plays a major role in healing, or it's played a major role in healing in my life. And I would probably suggest that it plays a major role in healing and maturity for humanity, right? All human beings that have something to forgive. But there are a couple of components to forgiveness that I think we got to talk about, right? Because if we can change our perspective on what it would mean for us to forgive, then we can change our perspective when we need forgiveness. And I think that would be tremendous. And like I said, creating harmonious relationships. And so let's start with what forgiveness isn't, like I said. And what I know when it comes to being the person who is making the decision to forgive, it's not forgetting, it's not reconciliation, even necessarily, right? To forgive someone doesn't mean that they're given an opportunity to do the thing that was offensive in the first place, right? Or even behave in a way that would suggest that they're not willing to change the thing, to right the wrong, right? No restitution, no equity. That's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is merely making the decision that, again, you're going to write off that debt. For whatever reasons, you decide to write the debt off. I know for me, that takes a couple of steps. You know what I mean? I don't think any of us are programmed to just automatically forgive like that. And even if we are, I think that would kind of signify that there's less health there than we would like to believe. It's not as altruistic as it sounds. And again, in my experience, it's been completely unhealthy, right? I know for me, I've had a hard time uh, getting rid of this martyr complex that I've had for almost my entire life. Uh, I, you know, I've been the guy for a lot of my life to kind of just let things slide in the name of people pleasing or keeping the peace as I perceived it. But really, I think when I get down to it, I wasn't giving myself the respect of fully allowing for my humanity to be a real thing for myself, right? I would come to a place where I would start judging some of my feelings towards people or towards situations or even towards institutions that I felt wronged me, or at least created some environments or some situations that were unfair as far as I saw it. And so, ironically enough, I wasn't forgiving anyone. I just was deflecting and ignoring the reality of lots of those situations. And so, I think the first real tangible step in moving towards forgiveness is owning the resentment, right? Suffice it to say, it's not okay for people to hurt people. It just isn't. And even more than that, it's even less okay for people or ideas even to manipulate situations so that they would hurt others in order to benefit self, right? Or at least create a favorable outcome for self. And I had to get to a point where I stopped believing that the most noble thing for me to do was, sacrifice. for no one else's sake. Um, but I truly believed at a time in my life that if I were suffering, then someone else was doing better, right? I had a very lose win perspective on life where I didn't necessarily have to win because losing in some sense was noble. And I got taken advantage of a lot, a lot. You know what I mean? I remember back in the day when I had first moved out to Long Beach, you know, me and four dudes staying in one place. And you know, the guy who had the place originally wasn't necessarily charging us rent, you know, but slowly and surely more of us moved out. And I thought it would only be fair for me to pay rent, even though that wasn't a thing before, right? So I had volunteered and it was like, I'd be willing to pay this amount and things like that. And, the response was, cool, thank you, right? Never did anyone ask me to step up in that way. And as a matter of fact, at the time, I didn't even have a job. I didn't have no resources. Um, we were all depending on the same resource in order to find work or make money. And it just was ridiculous for me to be like, yeah, no, I'll take on the responsibility with no plan, no means, no none of that. And I found myself being resentful for the space that I was in, right? And you know, really was considering that the person I was living with at that time was making much more money, had much more flexibility and things like that. Took on the responsibility of the lease, even before I had gotten there and all that. And suffice it to say, what I should have done was just wait for that person to be like, all right, you can't stay here no more. But again, this just kind of speaks to the attitude that I had, regarding self sacrifice and how noble that would be. But what came directly behind that was the resentment, right? And there was two things that I resented. One, my own decision to put myself into that position, and two, the person that I thought cared for me not having the compassion to be like, "Whoa, wait a minute, Matt. Like, I don't know how you plan on doing that, but maybe let's take some time to consider whether you can actually make those payments or not, right? Like, can you even pay rent? You don't have a job right now." And I had left the door wide open to be taken advantage of. And so, right, dude took advantage of it. And I could blame and all of that. But at the end of the day, it was my responsibility to make sure that I was acknowledging what I could or couldn't do. It was my job to be responsible and honest about what I was or wasn't okay or comfortable with. And most importantly, it was my job to communicate all of those things. And so instead of just putting myself on the chopping block, I decided that I was gonna be the hero of the story, and in some ways, tell myself, well, if everybody else leaves and abandons you, I'm here to stick with you, and I'm here to see it through. And that was a terrible decision, right? Um, but outside of that mindset, what I recognize is that I had a real tough time really being okay with my entire humanity, right? Like really being okay with who I was on a human level. Um, and that led to more and more circumstances where I allowed myself to be taken advantage of. But I always knew in the back of my mind that I couldn't really be upset at somebody else, right? Or at least that's the story that I was telling myself. I couldn't be mad at anybody else for the decisions that I had made, right? Like I had made this commitment. It was up to me to live up to the commitment, whatever it was, right? And in that circumstance, it was paying rent that I had, no money to pay and wasn't even asked to do it. And then it slowly turned into being, I don't know, a support or a lifeline for any relationship that I was in, right? If somebody was hurting, it didn't matter what was going on with me. I wanted to make sure that I could be there for a person. Um, and again, just kind of reduce who I was or what my needs were uh, for the greater good, as I thought, right? Or at least as I was telling myself. And then at some point, I stopped doing that. But it wasn't as though I was standing up for myself, right? It wasn't as though I was seeking to find win-win types of relationships. I would just invariably walk into relationships, situations, etc., where I just was okay with losing, right? And so I think a greater portion of getting to a place where you are willing to forgive, or you begin to understand what forgiveness requires, means honoring your own humanity. And there are enough circumstances where I legitimately was in the right, as far as, I knew, and even objectively, right? As other people were taking a look at situations or relationships and being like, yo, that shouldn't have happened to you. Whatever the case may be. I didn't have enough practice in holding that truth that I deserve better. I should be treated a certain way. I deserve a certain level of respect and care and dignity and the benefit of the doubt, right? Um, and so situations would come up where I would actually be slighted. You know what I mean? Where things actually turned out to be unfair, and not just didn't work in my favor, but objectively, we're like, yo, like that. How did that happen? Like that's not cool. Um, and again, being willing to give other people the benefit of the doubt really just caused a place within me to where I started not liking people. You know what I mean? I started really just being like, I'm gonna be to myself, or really just wanting to put the blame on other people for doing whatever they knew to do because it didn't work for me. Uh, and so finally, I got to a place where I was okay with being upset about things and felt like I didn't have to make excuses for anyone else, and their behavior, especially if it was harmful to me. And that took some doing. That took some working, right? Like I had to figure some things out about myself, and had to actually believe that I deserve better in order for me to be okay with the feeling of being pissed off that I didn't get what I thought I deserved. But I recognized that I couldn't actually forgive from the perspective that I was living, right? It's easy to talk about letting things go or being like, no, it's okay. You know what I mean? I really just hope and wish and pray that they're all right. And I hope for the best. But I was lying. I didn't hope for the best, right? Like secretly, deep down in my heart, I was hoping like, yo, I hope that fails. You know what I'm saying? I hope that whatever that person is going towards or whatever they're working toward, I hope it burns up. I hope it just goes down in flames. Um, and so you could say that you forgive, uh, and really be in a position where you're just deflecting or ignoring. And so I know that was a huge step for me. Being okay with things not being okay, being willing to admit that as things weren't working out for me, I felt a particular way about it, you know? And then even more than that, being willing to honestly express, yo, I didn't like the way that happened. Like, I really, really was hurt by that. I felt like that was a violation. That was mad disrespectful. All of those things had to be things that I had to work up to. Now, that's just me in my unique spot, right? Like, I'm sure that there are plenty of you out there who are like, I would never, you know what I'm saying? I would never let nobody take advantage of me. I wish somebody would, blah, 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 right? Um, but I think that for me opened the door for the next portion of forgiveness that I was already more prone to, right? Understanding through empathy. And there was this switch where things did go from I'm just going to pretend like everything is okay so I can people please to everything's not okay and let me figure out why it's not okay for you, right? Um I kind of always had the desire to put other people first, and good, bad, or indifferent. I believe that empathy and compassion are beautiful things, right? Um, I think they reflect a heart that is open and ready to love, or at least to learn the application of love as a verb, right? And so, as an actor, and most of you know that I've been an actor for my entire life, like since three. Always was thinking really interesting things. I remember being a kid, and you get introduced to Superman and who he is, and like he stands for truth, justice, and the American way, and that's really ironic because he's an alien, right? But anyway, uh, I remember being the kid who would have the thought of like, what does it feel like when Superman gets a bruise, or what does it feel like when Superman like wants to throw up, or even closer than that, like, or even deeper than that, like what does it feel like when kryptonite is this close to taking Superman's life, right? Like we didn't really see a whole lot of that depicted, especially not in the 90s, right? You just kind of saw like the physical anguish of like Superman, like, oh, it's kryptonite, and like he's being, you know what I mean, he's just melting, you know what I'm saying? But there's something that goes on internally based on that. You feel some kind of way, right? Like if you're this close to death, there are a lot of different thoughts that would come through your head. And so I was always curious about that. What does that look like? What does it look like when Superman gets his heart broken? You know what I'm saying? He seems invulnerable. He's got this big old chest and the perfect little finger wave curl on his forehead. You know what I'm saying? Like what does it look like when he's not that? What does it look like when he's not composed? Um, and I always thought that was a pretty interesting thought as a child, right? I didn't know too many kids around my age who were thinking those types of things. But anyway, I was always prone to empathy and compassion. I think something about being raised in a home where I had a sibling who needed like immediate attention and dire care for most of my life just opened up the door for empathy and compassion, right? Like it was kind of just it was a practice that I got really young. And so I kind of looked at things from that perspective a lot when I was a kid. As I grew and I started to heal, it became a pretty easy crossover, you know what I mean, to be able to do that on behalf of people who I could perceive were hurting, especially people that I was in close relationship with, right? And so really getting to the bottom of, right, especially in romantic relationships, you know what I'm saying? If I felt like something was happening that I didn't like, uh, it wasn't too tough for me to go into, well, she comes from this kind of home, or, her dad is an alcoholic, or, there's physical abuse in that household, or not even that, you know what I mean? Like this person only grew up with their grandmother, and their grandmother is, two and a half generations, you know what I'm saying, from the past. And so the types of things that they believe, the types of things that they saw were not the same things as the thing that we would apply in our modern day, right? Um, this person never knew what it was like to ride in a car at 80 miles per hour, right? Like when they had vehicles, they was only stopping out at 40, right? Like, it was really, really I had, like I said, a tremendous amount of practice in being able to apply critical thinking on behalf of someone else's circumstances. And it's pretty easy to be pretty empathetic, or I won't say easy. I'll just say that again, I was trained to be empathetic pretty early on. And so you take those two components, being able to recognize one's own humanity, and then go through the full spectrum of one's own emotions in response to something that's unpleasant or unfair, even, and recognize that that can be true, right? I can be in a place where someone did something to take advantage of me in some kind of way, or someone truly intended to hurt me, and that not be okay, and I can be pissed off about it, and I can wish that there was a different result, or that the thing would have gone a different way, whatever interaction or whatever, whatever relationship, however it turned out, right? Like I could sit there and be like, I deserve more, that's not okay, I'm not okay about it, right? Like I'm not just going to sit here and pretend like I'm happy. And then as I got a full grasp of that, and I was able to honor myself through that, then go into, well, so then what's happening, right? Like, how did we get here? What was that person going through? What's that person's experiences? What have they practiced in order to get to a point where they think that what they did is okay, you know? And, I can never put myself completely in somebody else's head, right? I'll never fully know what anybody else is thinking unless they express those kinds of things honestly. I just was a very, very observant type of individual, right? And a very curious type of individual as well. Um, but those two components created the space to make the decision from a healthy point, right? From a healthy standpoint, um, that I can choose to forgive. Now, at first, choosing to forgive meant choosing to permit for me, right? There's a lot of the expectation um, of reconciliation without full repentance. And that's a dangerous place to be in as well, right? When you're allowing people back in or giving them an opportunity to hold something valuable like your boundaries or your needs and not creating a barrier between your needs and reality or the things that you would like to see and reality, right? And so for the name or in the name of forgiveness, like I said, I permitted a lot of stuff, and had to come to a point where I recognized that that's not, again, as I started with, that's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. Forgiveness is not an opportunity for you to hurt me again. You know, Forgiveness is just recognizing that you weren't capable at the time of doing the thing that I hoped you would do. And then I had to go back and start checking myself, right? Like, am I actually communicating my expectations in a clear way? Am I holding myself responsible for how I got to this point in the first place, right? Because, you know, I wasn't the person who ever really held a very fatalistic view on things, right? Like, I was always a person who, for better or for worse, was willing to take responsibility for things, even things that weren't my responsibility, even things that weren't mine to hold. I could always have the question or conversation with myself as to how did I put myself here, right? It was always a lot less, why is this happening to me? And always a lot more of what did I do to create this? Um, Little did I know that's a pretty healthy question. And moreover, not a lot of people ask themselves that question. It's really easy for us as humans, once we experience something that we don't like, to turn the finger and start pointing at everything else, whether it be a person or whether it be an organization or an institution or a principle or an idea, whether it be politics, whether it be our parents, whether it be God as we see it. It's a lot easier for us to just sit in the place of emotional turmoil and decide that that's where we're going to stay. And based on that, decide that it's not our fault, it's everyone else's fault, or it's everything else's fault. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I truly believe that everything that I see in front of me is either something that I've expressed, I've said out loud, whether it's um, whatever, you know what I mean? I'll never get married, or I deserve to be alone, or um, you know, I'll always be broke or any of those things, right? You say it, and because we're made in the image and likeness of God, the creator, we create with our words. You know what I mean? There's even some that would say things are created in three different areas. You know what I mean? They're created in your mind first, and then they're created with your declaration, and then you put hands to the creation so it manifests in the physical, right? And I truly believe that. You create everything three different times. And so as I was becoming more and more conscious of that through, therapy and personal development work and that kind of thing, like I was able to get a good grasp on the truth and also understand that the truth and reality aren't necessarily always congruent, right? We can see a lot of things in reality and we can miss a lot of the truth in it based on our perspective. And so recognizing all of that, or I'll say even more accurately, realizing, right, making all of those things a reality, um, was the catalyst between understanding that forgiveness is not permission, and really walking in a space of forgiving from a place of love, forgiving from a place of resolve, and healthy resolve, right? Not pride. And so that is a journey and a challenge, man. And I think it's um I think it's important to say that it takes hard work to forgive. It takes hard work to forgive, you know? There's a scripture in the Bible that says that God casts our sins into a sea of forgetfulness. I don't know if anybody's ever been fishing, but when you cast out when you're fishing, if you're doing it with, like with the fishing pole and a line and, all that, you got to throw that joint. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't just unravel the thing and it casts. You know what I'm saying? Like you got to do a whole, as a matter of fact, if you watch the Goofy movie, the perfect cast involves so much of Goofy's body, right? Like it's 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, two is your you know what I'm saying? Like he's doing all kinds of stuff with his body in order to get this perfect cast. And then you watch him, the wind up and he lets it fly, and that joint flies for miles. And that's the perfect cast. But if you recognize the amount of work that he put in, the amount of physicality that he went through before he threw that joint, right? To cast something is active, and it exerts a great deal of energy and force. And so when we think about God casting our sins into a sea of forgetfulness, I imagine, you know, God's got that, you know what I mean? Like that fire, 107-mile-per-hour fastball type of arm, right? To where he winds up and he throws our sin, and it's not he tosses it or he lobs it or he just like scoots it away, like because he hates sin, because he literally cannot be around sin. He throws it as far away from himself as absolutely possible. And that's what it takes. You know what I mean? It takes that type of work to be willing to forgive. It takes that type of literal exertion to be able to get the offense that far away from you so that you can understand self and then attempt to, from a distant perspective, understand why and how we got the thing that we felt the need to throw away. And only through that physical exertion can you actually get it far enough away from you to get over it. You know what I'm saying? I think that if God were to kind of just like drop our sins into a sea of forgetfulness, right? Like it would be hard to forget. Like, you know what I'm saying? The thing would come bobbing back up to the surface. Like, that's your sin. That's the thing that you did and you pissed me off about it. Right. And yet that was a lot of my practice for a lot of my life. It was like, all right, I'm just gonna scoot this thing just outside of like my immediate sight, right? Like maybe I can't hit it in my periph, but you turn and then the thing is right there, and I'm reminded, and I'm like, son of a right, like, and it then would bring back and prick all the areas where the wound was still open. You know what I'm saying? Thus, not giving me the optimal opportunity to actually forgive. And it's funny, people talk about forgive and forget. And I think if you healthily and honestly forgive, you don't forget. As a matter of fact, you make it a point not to forget, right? You, based on that, uphold stronger boundaries. You know what I mean? You, based on that, you collect these experiences and you move different, you know? But if you're in a healthy place when you forgive, you don't move different to spite anyone. You move different to value and honor self. And again, that takes work. That takes a lot of awareness. That takes a lot of tools to be able to cope and, you know, deal with the emotion first. Um, Luckily I've replaced some tools, right? Like I had some very unhealthy habits, and some of them still kind of linger under the surface. Sometimes I'm very tempted to, you know, do whatever, to kind of take my mind off of things rather than making the decision to put my mind on the thing so that I don't forget, right? And from that position, like I said, truly be okay with not being okay, truly allow for that to be a real experience that I know is not going to kill me, right? So even if I'm okay with not being okay, right? I'm not dead because I'm not okay, right? I'm not bleeding out because I'm not okay. I'm just a little uncomfortable. And growing is uncomfortable, right? Anything that's ever gone through the process of growth, there's going to be discomfort there. You know what I'm saying? I can think about my kids now, my 4-year-old kids. They're hitting growth spurts left and right. And not long ago, a pair of my daughter's favorite shoes couldn't fit her anymore. And it was heartbreaking for all of us because there were some fly shoes. You know what I'm saying? Like I got her these little old school Vans, and they were extra glittery, and you know what I mean. They had Velcro straps and that type of thing, and they were tight, and they were her favorite shoes. Like she was wearing them everywhere, and she looked like a little princess. And very quickly, she outgrew those shoes. Very quickly, like way quicker than I anticipated. Right, way quicker than I wanted. And not only was there the physical pain of having to put her foot in the shoe and then recognizing it's too tight and that she can't walk around it and all the rest of that, but then there was also the like very real emotional lament that she couldn't wear the shoes anymore. She really liked those shoes. It was the same thing for my son. I got him, I have like a pair of Laker colored Jordan 1s, right? They're Concord grape and you know what I mean, black and white, and they just I love those shoes. Like they're the dopest colorway that I have in Jordan 1s. And I got my son a pair of matching ones, right? And he was wearing those things from like 6 months, like all the way until like 2.5, 3 years old. You know what I mean? He used to always be like, "Daddy, I want to wear the purple shoes," and I was like, "All right, if you wearing the purple shoes, I'm wearing the purple shoes, man." And he since has grown out of them, but he continues to talk about them. You know what I mean? Like almost at any given moment, he's like, he'll say, "Back when I was wearing the purple shoes," or "I miss my purple shoes," or those types of things. And I could tell that it really meant something to him, but he had to outgrow them, and that was uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for me. You know what I mean? I don't know when that colorway is gonna drop again. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if they're gonna be available in whatever size he is now, and he's a 10C now, right? He'll be 11 very, very soon, and then quickly after that we get into like big kid shoe sizes, right? And you know that means that they go from being like $60 to being like $110, just like mine are, right? um, but all of that, growing through all of that is uncomfortable. And that's the point. But I wouldn't hold it against him that he grew. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sure that he'll come to understand very soon that he can't hold it against himself or even hold it against me that he can no longer fit those shoes. It just is what happens, you know? And so we'll have the moments where we can talk about it, and we can explore those feelings that are big and disappointing and unpleasant. And then we can come to the reality of, you know what? That just is the real thing, man. Like you can't fit those shoes anymore, and that's that. But then we can move on to resolution from the place of forgiveness, right? You can't be upset with yourself that you're growing. It's a good thing that you're growing. You know what I mean? Daddy wants you to grow. Mommy wants you to grow. You want to grow. You keep talking about wanting to be as big as daddy someday, right? And so that means you're going to have to get rid of some old pairs of shoes. But you know what we can do? We can get you some new shoes, and we can get you shoes that you like, and you can make the decision as to what colors they are or what pattern you want and all of that. And from there, he can make the healthy decision that he doesn't have to hold on in resentment, and he also doesn't have to reconcile with those shoes. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't have to let those shoes back in his life because they just don't fit anymore. And I think as he continues to grow, as I continue to grow, as we all continue to grow and heal together, we'll be able to just see that We don't blame the shoe for it not fitting our foot anymore. And we don't blame our feet for growing. We just recognize that it's a part of the plan. And so we do what we can to get over it. We don't let those shoes back in our lives. And we don't forget what the shoes meant to us. So there you go. It was a nice little metaphor and analogy for you. But forgiveness is so much like that. Understanding the incapability that something has to meet your expectations. Not being okay with it not meeting your expectations, but being okay with everything moving forward based on knowing and understanding the reality that it just can't do the thing that you would like it to do anymore. Or in some respects, it never could. It never could do the thing to meet your expectations. And then we go into allowing forgiveness for ourselves. But I feel like that may be another conversation for another time. And right here and now, I'm going to go ahead and end this one right here. So, thank you guys so much for joining me for another episode of The Baggage Claim. This was brought to you by the MDS, the EQ Coach brand, and our flagship product, the ReHuman Workshops. Now, ReHuman is not a lecture, it's not a PowerPoint, it's a real-time emotional intelligence gym where you get the reps to apply tools to address and move through some of the most complicated or some of the most pressing social and emotional circumstances that we find ourselves in. There's not only ReHuman that we do for corporations, offices, institutions, etc., but then we have ReHuman Next Gen, which is our SEL program for youth and kids transitioning from middle school to high school and that type of thing. So if those things sound like something you would be interested in, all the information is going to be left in the description of this episode. You can also check me out at MDS EQ Coach on all the socials, right? Instagram, TikTok, blah, you name it. That's where I'm at. But I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, y'all. Thank you again for joining me. Do all the things, like, share, subscribe, share this, right? That means don't just share it again under the sharing. Anyway, like, subscribe, share this thing, turn on the notifications so you know whenever another episode is coming. And until next time, be love, y'all. Travel lighter.